if you've been following the One Piece story for any lengthy amount of time, and I have, then you've probably noticed that Oda doesn't really have a lot of direct references to the afterlife all that much. Now, don't get me wrong there. There are boatloads of symbolism in One Piece that tie back to religion, and even a lot of humor that's in that vein. Remember when Bartolomeo witnessed Luffy almost getting executed at Logtown, and now basically views him as the Messiah? Oh, and then of course we have the walking god complex that is Eneru, but what I'm basically saying here is that Oda did not establish a very elaborate afterlife in his series. There is an afterlife. We know that because Brook is a thing, but it's not really important, and we're probably never really going to reference it in the grander scheme of One Piece, like in a lot of other shonen manga. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing. I'm just saying that I grew up with, like, Dragon Ball Z, Bleach, and even Naruto kind of goes into the whole afterlife concept, and, recently this has kind of piqued my interest. You're like, oh, I wonder what really is, like, the religion in the One Piece world, if there is one, right? And when it comes down to, like, the afterlife and things, like, if the Straw Hat crew didn't know an afterlife existed, they do now, because Brook freaking sat them down and said, oh yeah, I died, and then my soul got kicked out of the afterlife, got knocked back down to Earth, and I am now inhabiting my skeleton. Yeah, so, you know, now, this is not the way Oda's going with this. He's not going to turn this into, like, an existential kind of thing, where we're going to really delve into philosophy and all that stuff involving the afterlife. There are other philosophical aspects of One Piece that you can examine all night and day, but the afterlife just really isn't one of them, but, that's the topic I felt like discussing today, so let's go into it. So, first off, I think I should go back and address the other shonen that I grew up with, you know, because a lot of them really did go crazy when it came to establishing a world after death. And the neat thing about that is that you could basically have your characters exist in another realm, but you could still focus on them, right? So like in Dragon Ball Z, I think that's the most overt one, where the afterlife is established so well to that point where whenever a character dies, it's really not a big deal. Not just because, like, you can use the Dragon Balls to wish them back, but, like, when Goku died in his fight against Cell, even though he asked to not be brought back, we still got to, you know, see what Goku was doing, because the afterlife is an established place. He has his own body. He's the same as he always was, except he has a halo over his head now. He can meet up with other people that have died in the past. He can train. So even when Goku's dead, he's not really dead, because we get to see what he's doing, you know? It's not like in other series when, like in Hunter x Hunter. Hunter x Hunter really doesn't have an established afterlife, so let's do that. When a character dies in Hunter x Hunter, they're gone. Just like in One Piece, you know, Ace is gone. We're never going to get to see Ace, like, training in Otherworld with King Kai or something. You know, it's like, you must learn the blazing Genki Dama, you know? And that's why I think I like that Oda doesn't go that route with it, where, yeah, it's pretty much like our world, where, hey, if you have a belief in an afterlife, there's a lot to choose from, that's fine, but it's the point of the matter, when someone dies in our world, we don't get to ever see them again while we're also part of this world. You know what I mean? Like, they're gone and they're never coming back, and we have to cope with that. And in One Piece, it's the same thing. Ace is dead. Whitebeard's dead. They're not coming back. The best that we could maybe hope for is like a scene where it's like, you know, like when Luffy first used Red Hawk, and in the anime they added that little, like, that image of Ace over Luffy, like he's guiding him forward. That wasn't even in the manga, I think. I think that was just something they added in the anime. But that's the best we could hope for. I really hope Oda doesn't go down that route, where it's like later on in the One Piece story, Luffy confronts like a ghost of Ace or some shit. I really wouldn't like it to go down that way. Then of course you have the zombies on Thriller Bark and everything, the shadows, which are basically in the place of like a soul. You know, you rip out someone's shadow, it's basically their essence, and you can throw them into a zombie. But yeah, that's basically just what, you know, the shonens that I knew and grew up with. Like, even Naruto, whereas Naruto in the beginning doesn't reference it all that much either, but then later on you get, like, the Impure World Resurrection, and we get an establishment that there is an afterlife, and we even see it at one point at the end of the story, and Naruto is, like, an example of that, like, the kind of the same thing with DBZ in a sense, where it's like, yeah, Itachi's dead, but we have a jutsu that can bring the dead back to life, so it's not like we're never gonna see him again, you know? And even now, in the story, in Naruto or in Boruto, like, you could have a character use the Impure World Resurrection and bring back Itachi if they really wanted to. So let's just talk about the Afterlife really quick, what we know about. Alright, so Oda obviously wants us to know that it does exist. There is like a greater world beyond One Piece. It's just not integral to the actual story itself. When Brook died, well, he consumed the Yomi Yomi no Mi beforehand, which I think even the existence of the Yomi Yomi no Mi kind of has to confirm there is some sort of life after death, because it's like, yeah, you eat this fruit and it allows you to come back after you die. I'm like, okay, well, that means there has to be some souls have to be real. There has to be something, some mechanism to, you know, carry your consciousness to and then back to Earth. And the Yomi Yomi no Mi also implies that, like, okay, someone that didn't eat this fruit has another afterlife waiting for them. So, yeah. Now, the way Brook described this in the anime is when he died, he basically became a Hitodama. A Hitodama is a Japanese piece of mythology or folklore where it's like the soul of a recently deceased human. We see these in Dragon Ball as well. In the Dragon Ball universe, whenever somebody dies, a normal person that's not like special like Goku or Vegeta or anybody, when they die, they basically become like just a little puff of fire. It's also could be known as a will-o-wisp or a will-o'-the-wisp, okay? And then, yeah, it's a Pokemon reference, but it's also a mythological reference. But anyway, yeah, just a little tiny like flame that's you, and you're still aware of yourself. You can kind of float around and just do ghost light flame sort of things. In the Dragon Ball universe, these are the way that you exist in heaven and stuff. In the One Piece world, it's pretty similar to that as well. When you die, you become a Hitodama and you start to float up to the afterlife. However, Brook, because eating the Yomi Yomi no Mi, I guess he gets up there and, you know, King Yama or like Saint Peter or somebody just kind of, oh, you ate the Yomi Yomi this time. Oh, I remember the last time someone ate that. Yeah, that's crazy. Anyway, and then bang, back to Earth with you. No eternal paradise for you. So, and we don't know if it's an eternal paradise. We don't know. Like, in the One Piece world, all we really got to see is a few scenes in the anime where, like, there's some bright clouds and Brook's soul starts floating up and then it floats back down, you know? It might not be a paradise. It might be like the Bleach afterlife. The Soul Society is not heaven in Bleach. The way that Kubo took it here is it was basically like the cycle of samsara in Buddhism. Like, there's like different realms you could go to. The Soul Society is just one of them. Hueco Mundo is the Hungry Ghost realm. It's not hell, it's the Hungry Ghost realm. There's a difference. Hell actually exists in Bleach as well. So who knows? Maybe Oda has some notes somewhere, because it's implied like he has all the like for Totland. Oda has notes and notes about all the different members of the Charlotte family and all the different islands of Totland. It's just that he'll probably never really reveal it in the story, maybe in like a data book later on. By the way, I need to get my hands on that Vivara card data book. I need to do like an import on that or something, because I need to see what's going on with that. I can't even read Japanese, but that's something I just feel like I need to own, you know? So yeah, maybe Oda has a note somewhere in his desk, and then it's like, oh yeah, this is the One Piece afterlife. This is how it works there. But in terms of like an overt like depiction of it, the best we got is when Brook was describing his ascension and then descension back to Earth and then finding his body and then being resurrected. And then later on, Brook makes references to the underworld when he was training with the Yomi Yomi no for 2 years, and he was fighting Zio, which, awesome name for a villain, because it just makes me think of the Power Rangers every time I hear him. But when he was fighting Zio, he takes out his sword, and that's when we find out, you know, Brook has ice powers now, but not just any ordinary ice powers, no. He has the powers of the wind of the underworld, which, that's pretty badass, if I have to say. Can we get an upgrade to that? Like, if Brook is literally channeling the powers of the dead, I think we could do it a bunch of other cool ways than just an ice sword. That's a good start, but we could do, like, I channel the powers of the river Styx. Stabs his sword into the ground and the whole world just freezes solid. That would be cool, right? The way Brook describes this is that his soul actually exists technically in like another realm, in another plane of existence, so it's constantly outputting this sort of like energy that's completely different from anything that exists in the mortal world. It's basically Brook describing himself as like, yo ho ho, I'm an abomination that doesn't belong in this mortal plane. That's why I'm so badass. Ha! So that's essentially what he is. he's running on this, like, soul power that isn't really supposed to be in this realm because you're supposed to pass it on. Like the powers of the revive fruit are, like, just, perverting the laws of physics in the One Piece world in some way. But okay. So, yeah, that's the most we get out of it is from Brook. And who knows? Maybe at the very end of One Piece, Brook will pass on and we'll actually get to see an afterlife for him. Like, it's like that scene at the end of Yu-Gi-Oh! Where Atem is walking into the tomb and we get to see all of his priests and everybody that he knew back in Egypt, and they're there waiting for him. I could see that with Brook. Like, at the end of the story, he's like, it's time for me to pass on to my fate. And then he sees, like, Yorkie and everybody waiting for him in the afterlife. By the way, minor reference to that. A lot of people seem to think Brook is immortal for some reason. I think I know why you think that. It's because, like, oh, he got granted a second life by the Yomi Yomi no Mi, therefore, unless he's, like, physically killed, you know, like, he's, like, destroyed or something, he'll just keep on living forever. I didn't take it to mean that like that. I took it to mean, like, he's guaranteed a second life. And that life is just a life. That's all it is. Like, in the One Piece world, humans tend to live a little longer, especially if you're superhuman, like Dr. Kureha, than in our world. But that would only guarantee Brook maybe, like, I don't know, 140 years, which is a long time, sure, but he's not immortal. I think he would, you know, he was, like, in his 30s. He was, like, 38 when he died the first time. Then he got brought back by the Yomi Yomi no Mi. Took him a year to find his body. I don't know if that accounts for it. But then he spent 50 years floating around on a ship. So Brook has already spent, like, more time living his second life than his first life. So I think he's going to get to the point where he would just pass on, like, by natural causes. Now, he has a skeleton, but I think that's just what it meant. But who knows? Maybe that's not the case. Maybe as long as his soul exists in this mortal plane, he'll keep on living forever until the soul gets forcibly removed or his body gets destroyed by some means. Who knows? But that's just the way I view it. Now, as for the exact location of this afterlife, I actually know all about that, in case you were curious. I could tell you right now where it is and how you gain access to it. It's actually the same answer to a lot of things in One Piece. It's Nami's cleavage. Yeah, Nami's cleavage. That's where the afterlife is. It actually works for everything. Where's the last road poneglyph? It's in Nami's cleavage. I knew this for a while. I just didn't want to tell you to keep the mystery alive, but it's in Nami's cleavage. In fact, guess where the One Piece is? That's right, Nami's cleavage. This was literally just so I could show pictures of Nami's boobs for a little while. I got kind of... It's been a while since I actually showed them off, so I'm just like, I gotta work that into the religion discussion video of all things. Actually, fun fact, I liked, one of my favorite outfits that Nami has ever worn was her Thriller Bark outfit that had the pink and the frills and the crosses down the center of it. I wish she got to wear that a little longer, but yeah, that's one of my favorite outfits of hers. Alright, so now, let's talk about religion. Don't worry, don't click off the video, we're not gonna get way into it. Oh wait, hold on a second. I'm an atheist, therefore allow me to go on a 20-minute rant about why your belief is... I don't care. Believe whatever you want to believe, as long as you respect other people, I think that's perfectly acceptable. Okay, so, religion in One Piece. I actually had to do some digging for this, because I'm like, is there any reference to, like, a church or anything in the world of One Piece? Like, do they have, like, a gathering of people worshiping, like, you'd think there'd be, like, a sea god or something, you know? And there is, kind of. There was the time when the Straw Hats were approaching Thriller Bark, and, actually, a lot of Thriller Bark's gonna come back a lot here. Thriller Bark seemed to be the place where Oda threw in a lot of references to religion. Maybe, I think maybe just because he wanted that sort of, like, gothic horror aesthetic, you know, so he has the creepy graveyard and everything. So we'll come back to Thriller Bark a lot here, but when the Straw Hats were approaching Thriller Bark, they had that tribute that they saw. It was a trap planted by Moria and everybody, but they referenced, like, oh yeah, people would put, like, booze and food and stuff in a barrel and send it out to sea as an offering to the sea god. So that was a reference there. Like, so there might be some religions out in the world that worship the god of the ocean, like Poseidon or some shit. Makes sense given that most of the One Piece world is covered in water. But then when we get to Thriller Bark, we get the scene with Absalom. Remember what Absalom tried to do? Yeah, I remember what Absalom tried to do. No. No. But, he tried to marry Nami in a church. It's an actual church. There's crosses, like, Christian crosses, and there's a priest that has a hat that has a Christian cross on it. And the church is laid out like, a church. And there's, like, people on either side, and they're having a wedding ceremony. And even more so in that arc, you have Usopp and Chopper running around wearing, like, cloves of garlic around their neck and carrying crosses to ward off the evil. So, yeah, it definitely seems to be, like, there's some sort of religion in One Piece that involves crosses. I'm not going to say it's Catholicism, because that raises way too many questions at that point. Who would be the Jesus in the One Piece world? I don't know. Answer that question, I guess. But, yeah, so I don't know if Oda was just putting that in there as, like, to add to the horror aesthetics. Like, well, I'm gonna have zombies and ghosts and shit running around, so obviously I need to throw in references to, like, religion. Like, he might have just done it just solely because of he wanted to have Usopp freaking out, like, Usopp and Chopper, like, back, foul demon! Maybe Oda just wanted to do that. So don't take this stuff too seriously. Like, when you see this in the One Piece world, don't think that, like, don't have your mind explode because you're like, oh, wait, Usopp has a cross. Does that mean that Catholicism is a thing? I think it was just Oda being, just being funny. This is what he was doing. And actually, while we're on the subject of Catholicism, I wonder what's up with that freakishly huge brick of a Bible that Kuma's always lugging around with him. Even after he becomes a soulless machine, he still carries that thing around like it's his teddy bear. Actually, that makes sense because Kuma is a teddy. You see what I did there? Okay, cool. Yeah, I highly doubt it's a real Bible. Rather, people have actually thought that it's like a backup drive for him because he's a robot now. I like to think that Vegapunk programmed his previous personality when he was a member of the Revolutionary Army into the Bible, and it's actually going to be a key element for returning Kuma to the way he was. But, yeah, I just highly doubt it's a regular Bible with, like, passages and stuff. Also, there's some references to Satan in One Piece. Remember that time Brook got sent to that island with all those starving people under siege by the Long Arm tribe, and they decided to do the rational thing and, take up arms and try to fight back? No, they tried to summon the devil, because, yeah, that's how you do stuff. I mean, whatever, you gotta do what you gotta do. And, Brook landed there because of Kuma, so that's a weird tie-in at the same time, and so they thought that he was the Dark Lord Satan in all of his glory, so, yeah, that was a little bit of a misunderstanding, but it was a pretty funny moment. But yeah, that's probably the most direct reference we have to any kind of religion, and like we see a church, like the Straw Hats go to other islands and they don't necessarily have like places of worship there or anything like that. Sometimes like in Alabasta you'll have like the guardian deity of Alabasta was the falcon, and also you have the jackal, so they're like worship there, kind of like the ancient Egyptians would worship the falcons, like Horus, so there's like references to it like that. It's never direct. It's never like Luffy is walking around Alabasta and then he sees a church and there's like a bunch of people bowing to a giant falcon statue. It'd be kind of awkward whenever Pell would walk by. It's like, oh, Pell! Oh, you're our savior! I'm like, okay, guys, I'm just walking down to get some, groceries whenever. Why does this always happen whenever I walk through town? Now, the most direct reference to this, though, in One Piece is, of course, Skypiea. Because I think that's what Oda was going for there. He's like, all right, we're going into the sky, and who lives up on the clouds? It's like, we're going to have some references to religion here. Even so, with that, not really a lot of, like, there's, like, do you think that there's any place in the One Piece world where there would be, like, a giant temple or something where people would worship? You'd think it would be, like, Skypiea, right? But we don't really get to see it all too much. Even so, there's a lot of people that pray, and a lot of people that, the title of the ruler of Skypiea is just God. Gonfall was God before Eneru. And Eneru himself thought himself to be almighty, but Eneru, you have to remember, he was just a guy. He was just a sky person. Is that the correct nomenclature? Sure, he was just a sky person. He lived in Blicka, and then he consumed a Logia, and then he got it into his head that, like, I am all-powerful. And, he's like, well, I have the power to become freaking electricity. I have a power that is greater than everyone else around me, so therefore I must have ascended to a higher plane of existence. And he was probably a few Fruit Loops short of a Cocoa Puff box, so Okay, what? And also, Eneru was a little messed up here, so he had kind of like the god complex going on, like, I will create a new world. Actually, no, Eneru was not so much about, I'm gonna create a new world like Light from Death Note. Eneru was more just about, like, I'm gonna, treat people horribly and just have them bow to my every whim, and so I could build a ship so I could fly to the magical paradise. That was his goal. After the Maxim was completed and Luffy beat him, like, Eneru didn't even think to turn back around. Like Luffy did defeat Eneru, but it's not like he was mortally injured or anything. He knocked Eneru's ass out, he woke back up, and he was like, oh, shit, okay, well, I got my arc, screw this, I'm going to Fairy Verth. Like, Eneru, if he really wanted to, he could have turned right back around and used his power to just decimate the sky. Like, you saw Deathpeea, you saw all the stuff he could do. He, not fight Luffy again. He could have sailed off to any part of the world and just wreaked his destruction. But no, he didn't want to do that. His whole thing was like, no, I need to ascend even further, even higher. So that was Oda's message on, no matter how much you have, even to the point where people are referring to you as a god, you are still human, Eneru. You are still a mortal, and you still desire things on the greater scale. Like, you'll never be satiated. You'll never be satisfied just because of your inherent, your inherent mortality, I guess I should say. That's why you always crave something bigger and better, and that's why he craved to go to the Fairy Verth. Now, Gonfall himself is now the god of Skypiea, and keep in mind, when I say god, that is merely their title for the ruler of Skypiea. All right, and some of them might, like, pray to Gonfall and things like that, but I don't really think Gonfall wanted to be seen in the same way that we would revere an actual god. You know what I mean? So, like, keep that in mind as well. Gonfall is now the ruler of Skypiea, and he's a pretty chill dude, and he's a very compassionate ruler, so everything should be good right now in the sky. But, yeah, Eneru was just someone that got in and over his head, had a god complex, got this amazing power, and also kind of a message on the whole, might makes right sort of thing. Is it really just the person, like, who really gets to determine what is right in this world? In Eneru's case, he viewed it like whoever has the most power gets to decide what's right and what's a sin and what's wrong and not. The thing is, he was still corruptible, so that's the issue there. But, yeah. Alright, so that's everything involving Eneru I wanted to discuss, and truth be told, that is probably where this video would have ended, but this morning, I was just kind of sitting around brainstorming, trying to figure out how I'm going to structure this video. Like, I want to talk about Eneru, obviously, I want to talk about Brook and Thriller Bark and everything that happened there. But then I started to think, I'm like, why is there not a widespread religion in the One Piece world? Like, let's take this out of the concept of it just being a manga, and let's actually put yourself in this world. Like, okay, you're living in the One Piece world. How come there's not, like, a central religion? And at first I started to think that geography is everything, and, there are islands scattered all over the world. It's a world filled with island nations. So maybe there can't be a major religion that so many people follow, like Catholicism or Islam in our world, that have followers in the billions. The reason that can't exist in One Piece is because the people are just too split up, and they all have their island nations. So they might have, like, Alabasta worships the Falcon as their deity. The people of the sky have their own separate thing. Maybe the people of Water 7 worship some stuff. Like, there's no centralized thing that's really all that widespread that really gets in the numbers of, like, Catholicism, just because it's just not feasible. There's not a lot of countries all smattered together. They're scattered all over the place. But then I started to think of another reason why there wouldn't be something like that. Because trade is a thing. There's still ships that travel all over the place. And then I started to think about the world government. You know what the symbol of the world government is, right? Kinda looks like a cross. Oh, they're a theocracy, kind of. Not really, but kind of. Alright, so that's when it hit me, like, the world government basically treats itself as this central religion to the world. Like, they treat the Tenryubito as deities, as gods on earth that have to be revered and have to be worshipped is the best word I can come up with here. Not even just treated with respect. No, they don't teach people you have to treat the Tenryubito with respect. They teach that you have to worship them. Like, when a Tenryubito is walking down the street, you don't just bow or salute. No, you get down on your all fours, like prostrate, and you bow to their reverence. You're not even worthy to look them in the eye. That's how the Tenryubito are set up, and I just did a video about this a few days ago. But, yeah, that's really how they are set up, and in a theocracy that really focuses on, like, the combination of religion and government to the point where, like, the rulers of said government might as well be viewed as living gods, that's basically what the Tenryubito are. Now, when I did my world government discussion, I stated that they're basically an oligarchy. They're led by a small committee of people, the Gorosei. Now that we know what we know about Im-sama, there's also ways that you can view it as sort of like a totalitarian government, because there's just like one singular ruler, kind of like a dictatorship, you know, that kind of deal. But at the end of the day, I still think it's the Gorosei that make most of like the day-to-day decisions, and all the major decisions like are taken from Im-sama. So even if you just want to include Im-sama plus the 5 Gorosei, you have 6 people. That's still kind of an oligarchy there. But definitely overtones of theocracy, to the point where probably any sort of like major religion might actually become a threat to the world government. So that's why they've kind of maybe taken on the ideal of worshiping the Tenryubito. This adds a whole new dimension to this for me, because whenever you think about the reason the Tenryubito existed, the reason I always came up with was, and this is still one, but like, they keep the Tenryubito in power to kind of showcase that the families that began the world government, they're still just as strong now as they were back then. The fact that they're related to the original 20 families, that's important to keep the public, you know, like, oh yes, this system has worked for 800 years, and it will continue to work, because the people that are in charge are still basically the same people that lived all the way back then. You know, so that's one reason you got to keep them in power. It is like a symbolic thing. Also, the money that they provide to the world government is also extremely integral. But then I got to this whole other aspect of it, where it's like, the people need to worship something. And the idea that, like, oh yeah, you can worship something. Worship the world nobles. There's the celestial dragons. They're the gods of this world. So yeah, there could be their religion. So now I start thinking, like, there could be like chapels and churches set up all over the One Piece world that we just never saw before. Because it's not like every time we go to a new island, Oda's gonna break down, like, that's the bakery, that's the meat shop, Luffy, meat! No. That's the church, that's the post office. You know, like, Oda's not gonna do that every time we get to a new island. So there might be a place where you could literally worship the Tenryubito at all islands that are allied with the world government. In fact, I wouldn't be surprised if the world government required that. Like, oh, well, thank you for being admitted into the world government. Okay, your payment seems to be in order. All right, so we order you to have, here are your flags, the world government flags. You have to put those up all over town. Okay, at least every 3 blocks or so, there has to be a world government flag. And we'll begin construction of your, Tenryubito chapel immediately. Wouldn't be surprised in the slightest if that's how it worked. And guess if they do the donation, like the passing the plate, you know, donate, guess where all that money's going to? Yeah, it's like, I would imagine they would call it like, oh, you're paying reverence or something, you know, like, or some bullshit like that. Like, oh, yes, the Tenryubito, you know, they're the ones that control this world, and they started the world government, so they need to be paid tribute. So, yeah, that actually makes a lot more sense now. Especially when you consider, like, the world government sigil. It looks like a cross. I mean, it is a cross, just a different kind of one. Yeah, so that's pretty nuts. That was kind of like a revelation I had. Maybe you came to that revelation a while ago. He's like, well, obviously, Matt, but, you know, it took me a little while, but I'm like, yeah, when you actually start delving into this, it is kind of freaky, you know? It's going to be even more so when the revolutionaries take out the Tenryubito. Because that wouldn't just be the ruling class, you know, dismantled. That might be, like, the religion dismantled as well, or the closest thing they had to it. That's gone as well. So, Yeah, that would be crazy. So we'll see where this is going. But yeah, I just wanted to make a video about this because it's like an aspect of One Piece that doesn't really go into all that much. And I a few years back when I was still reviewing Bleach mainly, I talked about religion in Bleach and Buddhism. So I wanted to do something with that here with One Piece. It was a lot of fun. Thank you guys for you know, sitting through this whole thing. I know it's a different kind of video. Not everyone's going to be into the whole religion discussion and everything like that. But hey, I think as long as you don't like, I think it's fine to discuss it as long as you're not like shoving it down someone's throat and you're just, this is a fictional context and it's just good to have, you know, parallels from our world into One Piece and how this all syncs up and everything. So yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed. This will be Tekking101 signing out. Have a great night.